He rode away to save her heart, but 3 days on the open trail taught him that freedom means nothing when every sunset reminds you of the woman you left behind.
Subscribe to Wild Sky Stories. Turn on the bell icon so you can do not miss any new video.
The sun hung low over the horizon, painting the Texas sky in shades of amber and crimson that seemed to set the whole world on fire. Wyatt Cole stood at the edge of the McAllister ranch, his weathered hands gripping the wooden fence as he watched the last light of day slip away from him like water through his fingers. Behind him, he could hear the distant sounds of supper being prepared in the main house. The clatter of dishes, the soft murmur of voices, and somewhere in the middle of it all, her laughter. Clara McAllister's laughter was something he had carried with him across 1,000 lonely miles, through bitter winters and scorching summers, through gunfights and cattle drives that seemed to stretch on forever. Had first seen her 3 years ago when he rode onto this land looking for work. His horse had been half dead from thirst, and he himself had not been much better off. She had been standing on the porch, her auburn hair catching the afternoon light, and when she smiled at him, something shifted inside his chest that he had never been able to put back in place. Ara was the daughter of old Tom McAllister, the wealthiest rancher in the territory. She had been educated back east, had learned to play piano and speak French, had worn silk dresses to fancy balls in Boston. But she had come back to Texas because her father needed her, and somewhere along the way, she had fallen for a dusty cowboy who owned nothing but his horse and his saddle. Woo. Titi closed his eyes and breathed in the evening air, trying to memorize the smell of this place. Sagebrush and cattle, fresh hay, and the distant promise of rain. Tomorrow he would be gone, and these scents would fade into memory like everything else he had ever loved. Sound of footsteps behind him made his heart clench tight in his chest. He knew those footsteps better than he knew his own heartbeat. "You missed supper," Clara said softly, coming to stand beside him at the fence. Was not hungry. She was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally turned to look at her, he saw that her eyes were red-rimmed, her cheeks still damp with tears she had tried to wipe away. "When are you leaving?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "First light." Clara nodded slowly, as if she had known this was coming all along. Perhaps she had. Perhaps she had always known that loving Wyatt Cole was like trying to hold on to the wind. "Pa says there is no rush," she said. "He says you can stay as long as you want. He says you have earned your place here." Wyatt turned to face her fully, and the pain in her eyes nearly broke him in two. "Clara, I cannot be what you need me to be. I have never asked you to be anything other than what you are. That is the problem." He reached out and touched her face, his rough fingers gentle against her soft skin. "What I am is a man who cannot stay in one place. I have tried, Clara. God knows I have tried. But every morning I wake up and I feel these walls closing in around me. And I know that if I stay much longer, I will suffocate." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she pressed her face into his palm. "I could come with you," she said desperately. "I could leave all of this behind, the ranch, my father, everything. I would follow you anywhere, Wyatt. Do you not understand that?" "I understand it," he said, his own voice growing thick with emotion. "That is exactly why I have to go." Clara stepped back from him, confusion and hurt warring in her beautiful green eyes. "What do you mean?" Wyatt turned back to the fence, gripping the wood so hard that splinters bit into his palms. "You think you could be happy following me from town to town, living out of saddlebags, never knowing where your next meal is coming from? You think you could watch your hands grow rough, and your clothes turn to rags, and still look at me with love in your eyes?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I could. Maybe for a year," he agreed, "maybe even 2. But eventually you would start to resent me. You would look at me and wonder why I could not just settle down like other men, why I could not give you children and a home and all the things you deserve. and I would see that resentment growing in you day by day, and it would kill whatever love we have left. You do not know that. I know myself." He turned back to her, and for the first time she saw the tears glistening in his own eyes. "I know what I am, Clara. I am not a good man. I am not a man who can make promises and keep them. The only thing I have ever been good at is riding and surviving, and that is no kind of life to offer a woman like you." Clara reached out and grabbed his shirt, pulling him toward her with a strength that surprised them both. "Then change," she demanded. "People change, Wyatt. You could change if you wanted to. Could I?" He looked down at her with such profound sadness that it stole her breath away. "I am 34 years old, Clara. I have been on my own since I was 12. That is more than half my life spent wandering, and I do not know any other way to be. I have tried to imagine myself growing old on this ranch, watching seasons pass from the same piece of ground year after year, and every time I do, I feel something inside me start to die. So you would rather break my heart than even try. I would rather break your heart now than destroy it slowly over the next 20 years. Clara released his shirt and stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself as if trying to hold herself together. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of coming rain across the prairie, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote began to howl. "I hate you," she whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. "I know." "No," she shook her head, fresh tears streaming down her face. "No, I do not. That is the worst part. I could never hate you, Wyatt, no matter how much I want to." He closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest as sobs racked her body. He buried his face in her hair and breathed her in, committing every detail to memory. The way she fit perfectly against him, the smell of lavender in her hair, the sound of her heart beating against his own. "I love you," he said, the words torn from somewhere deep inside him. "I need you to know that. I love you more than I have ever loved anything or anyone in my entire life, and that is precisely why I have to go." Clara looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for something, anything that might give her hope. "I do not understand. If you love me, how can you leave?" "Because love is not enough," he said gently. "Love cannot change who a man is at his core. Love cannot turn a wild horse into a plow horse. All it can do is make both of you miserable when you try. So what am I supposed to do?" she asked brokenly. "Just let you ride away and never see you again?" Wyatt cupped her face in his hands and pressed his forehead against hers. "You are supposed to live, Clara. You are supposed to find a good man, a better man than me, who can give you everything you deserve. You are supposed to have children and grandchildren, and grow old in a house full of love and laughter. That is what I want for you, even if I cannot be the one to give it to you. I do not want another man, I want you." "I know, sweetheart, I know." They stood there in the gathering darkness, holding each other as the stars began to appear one by one in the vast Texas sky. Neither of them spoke or a long time, because there were no words left to say. Everything that needed to be said had been said, and all that remained was the quiet devastation of two hearts breaking in perfect unison. Finally, Clara pulled back and looked at him with eyes that held both resignation and a fierce, undying love. "If you ever change your mind," she said slowly, "if you ever wake up one morning and realize that maybe the wandering is not enough anymore, you know where to find me." Wyatt smiled sadly. "You will not wait for me. Watch me. Clara, do not make me a promise like that. It is not fair to either of us. Life is not fair," she said simply. "You taught me that." He kissed her then one last time. It was a kiss filled with all the words he could not say, all the promises he could not make, all the love that he would carry with him for the rest of his days. When they finally broke apart, both of them were trembling. "Goodbye, Wyatt Cole," Clara whispered. "Goodbye, Clara McAllister." He turned and walked back toward the house, and he watched her go until she disappeared through the front door. The light in her bedroom window came on a few minutes later, and he stood there watching it until it finally went dark. Then he went to the bunkhouse and lay down on his bed for the last time, staring at the ceiling until sleep finally claimed him. He was gone before the first rays of dawn touched the horizon. He saddled his horse in silence, his movements practiced and efficient, and rode out through the main gate without looking back. He knew that if he turned around, if he saw the ranch house one more time, he might lose his resolve entirely. The open road stretched out before him, endless and inviting. The sky was clear, the air was crisp, and for the first time in months, he could breathe without feeling like something was crushing his chest. This was what he can. Ew. This was what he was made for. The freedom of the trail, the rhythm of hooves on hard-packed earth, the knowledge that the next horizon held new possibilities. But as the miles passed beneath him, something strange began to happen. The freedom that had always sustained him began to feel hollow. The endless sky that had always lifted his spirits now seemed empty and cold. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. Every time the wind blew, he heard her laughter. He rode for 3 days straight, stopping only when his horse needed rest. He crossed rivers and climbed mountains and slept under stars that seemed to mock him with their indifference. And every step of the way, he waited for the peace that always came with movement, the sense of rightness that he had known since he was a boy on his own in a harsh world. It never came. On the 4th day, he found himself standing at a crossroads. One path led north, toward Montana and new opportunities. The other led back the way he had come, back to Texas, back to her. He thought about what he had told Clara, about how love was not enough to change a man. He thought about all the reasons he had given her for leaving, all the logical arguments he had made about freedom and resentment and the inevitable decay of passion. And then he thought about the way she looked at him when she said she would wait. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe love could change a man, if he was brave enough to let it. Maybe the freedom he had been chasing his whole life was not out there on the open road at all. Maybe it was something you found with another person, something you built together, brick by brick and day by day. Or maybe he was just a fool who could not live without the woman he loved. Either way, he knew what he had to do. He turned his horse around and pointed it south. The ride back seemed shorter somehow, as if the land itself was urging him on. When the McAllister ranch finally came into view, his heart was pounding so hard he could barely breathe. Clara was on the porch, just as she had been the first day he saw her. When she spotted him riding toward her, she stood frozen for a long moment, as if afraid to believe what she was seeing. Then she was running. He met him at the gate, and he barely had time to swing down from his horse before she was in his arms, laughing and crying all at once. "Brr. You came back," she gasped. "You actually came back. I tried to leave you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "God help me, I tried. But it turns out that freedom does not mean much when you are free to do nothing but miss someone." Clara pulled back and looked at him, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "What does this mean?" Wyatt took a deep breath and spoke the words he had never thought he would say. "It means I am done running. It means I choose you, Clara. I choose love." He kissed him then, and in that moment, Wyatt Cole finally understood what freedom really meant. It was not about open roads and distant horizons. It was about finding the one person who made you feel at home no matter where you were. He had finally found his way home.